From Synozur, this is Polaris. I'm Chris McNulty. Technology innovation opens new avenues for creativity and new business models. How does content drive further technology change? Have you ever wondered who turned Hollywood gossip into a global empire? Today, we'll meet the person who did that. He started in the trenches, literally fixing cables under New York streets, and went on to launch a TV network beaming pop culture into 140 countries. This is Polaris. Welcome to Polaris Pathways. I'm your host, Chris McNulty, Chief Technology Officer at Synozur. Synozur, the transformation company, reimagines business for our clients, navigating strategies and leadership culture with ease. Today's episode is all about technology, entertainment, and innovation colliding in one amazing career. I'm happy to introduce you to Larry Namer, a media pioneer best known as the co-founder of E! Entertainment Television. Larry has over 50 years in entertainment, from wiring cable TV in Manhattan to building a multi-billion-dollar media empire. If you've ever watched Jon Stewart or the Kardashians, you can partly thank him for making celebrity a worldwide video pastime. It's getting closer to the end of the year. At first, I thought this would be a great lighthearted episode about entertainment. But it's also a very real lesson in how the best founders read and react to technology shifts to find the next new market. Larry will join us in a few minutes, but first, let's define our terms and our data points. As usual, our reading lists and references will be included in the show notes. Streaming is transforming entertainment. In fact, by mid-2023, streaming was over 38% of all TV usage in the U.S., surpassing cable's shrinking 29% share for the first time. Marshall McLuhan's famous phrase, "the medium is the message," reminds us that the form of communication often shapes society more than the content itself. The evolution from broadcast TV to cable illustrates this perfectly. When the medium shifted from a handful of national networks to hundreds of cable channels, programming diversified into niche genres like 24-hour news, music videos, and entertainment. The rise of the internet, followed by platforms like YouTube and TikTok, transformed the experience again, turning audiences into creators and making short-form, algorithm-driven content the norm. Each new medium didn't just deliver content differently, it redefined what content could be. Larry's been ahead of the curve time and time again, so it's more than time to take Larry from our virtual green room to the Polaris stage. Let's go. So welcome back. Today, I'm happy to introduce Larry Namer to Polaris. Larry, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Where are you calling from today?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Love Los Angeles. When the weather is good there, it is perfect. So today I'm in the foggy, gloomy, misty Pacific Northwest in Vancouver. So Larry, you've got a really fascinating career. I'd love it if you could just take a few minutes to start us on your journey. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in an area called Coney Island, which was the first real amusement center in the U.S. way before Disneyland. It was, pretty lower class neighborhood. And then you have Nathan's, which doesn't go away. So,
yep.
Nathan's fries are worth going there for.
So you had the bar set for large scale entertainment being close to the Wonder Wheel and the Cyclone. So it takes you on, you went to college and then you got into cable TV shortly after that, if I remember.
Yeah, I got in, I graduated with a degree in economics, quickly found out that there weren't many jobs for people with degrees in economics. So I took what I thought was going to be kind of a mindless summer job until I figured out what you do with, that economics degree. And so somebody I knew was in the electrical workers union and said, "Hey, we just organized this thing called cable TV. I'm not really sure what it is, but here's the number for the shop steward. Call them up and tell them the union's sending you." So that's what I did. And they gave me a job as an an assistant underground splicer in Manhattan, and $90 a week.
You were sort of at the cusp of watching the way that technology changes business and changes the world. What was it like in those early days?
Well, I mean, it was the Wild West because none of us really knew what we were doing because we were inventing it as we go along. I mean, but when I started in Manhattan, it was miraculous that we had 17 channels there. And, that was, because everybody's used to just having ABC, NBC, CBS. And now all of a sudden you had, more channels. And for people in Manhattan, good reception because they didn't have that before that. But, it was tens of miles or hundreds of miles of cable that were put under the streets of New York City.
Did everyone understand the potential, or is there a lot of resistance to change?
A lot of resistance to change. The company when I was there it was owned by Chuck Dolan. It was under the name of Sterling Manhattan. And, but Chuck had sold to Time Incorporated when Time was still a publishing company. Essentially, they did magazines and books. But Time had made this decision that over 10 years, they wanted to migrate the company to become a media company. And so it was a fascinating time to be there because internally, being part of an early part of the video division, which I think there were maybe 10 of us in the video division, it was whatever you could dream of, because there was nobody there to tell you what you couldn't do because nobody knew.
I'm struck by the parallels to what we've seen with the rise of the cloud, with the rise of the internet, is technology moves ahead and then content needs to catch up and maybe move ahead of it. So I remember those early days in New York. We had channels, 2, 4, and 7, CBS, NBC, ABC. There was Channel 5, Channel 9, Channel 11, home of the Yule log, and Channel 13. Suddenly you have this multi-channel broadband capability emerging. When did you realize that there was a need to create more content to fill Channel 14, Channel 18, Channel 100?
Sure. Well, we were basically surviving on, two things, not so much the content, but good reception.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the next thing to come along, which really began to drive people to want it and take it and overcome, there was always that attitude, I would never pay for TV. But, then we had the Knicks and the Rangers. And sports fans just loved it and flocked to it, and bars wanted it. And so we built a commercial business. But, there was a guy in the company, a time anchor named Jerry Levin. And Jerry, said, "Hey, I want to start this new thing called Home Box Office, and we're going to put this programming up on satellites." And we were like, "What do you mean? What's a satellite?" And because there wasn't on that, there were no commercial satellites. I mean, the government probably had a bunch of them, but so we were all in them. And the first thing I think we put up was a waltz contest from Pennsylvania somewhere. And
really?
Yeah, and that was kind of the test to make sure it all worked. And so, but then, the whole concept of Home Box Office, not just doing movies, but we started, and Jerry was the architect of it, Jerry Levin, started getting exclusive rights to the fights, and, you're talking about the days of Muhammad Ali and Frazier and Foreman and all of those. And, that got tremendous attention. And then we started doing movies and stuff like that. And it really did take off. And, and then Ted Turner came around, and said, I'm going to put this, I have a station in Atlanta. I'm going to put it up on the satellite and distribute it. And we were like, that's kind of crazy. Who wants to watch an Atlanta station when you're in Sacramento? But, Ted was right and we were wrong. And so TBS came, and then Ted said, I want to do 24-hour a day news. And, at the time where, if you wanted to watch the news, you had to tune in at 6 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. That was the only time it was available. And, CNN was born and stuff. So Ted really led that whole Um, you know, everything can be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, then the Weather Channel followed and, lots of other channels popped up, including knockoffs of HBO. You had Showtime and Cinemax and Movie Channel and all of those things popped up. So, and then it just exploded.
Yep. So let's roll it forward a little bit, because I know that you went out to the West Coast to work with Valley Cable. And in doing my research, this was the time, I think this is sort of the last bastion of an older distribution model. I remember when Paramount was relaunching Star Trek: The Next Generation, it was this idea: we're going to create a franchise, but we're going to distribute it back through syndication instead of creating a new outlet for it. Sometime around then, like, E-Entertainment gets bored. How did you come up with the idea for that, for something that's become a household name?
Yeah, well, we, I rose from working in the sewers to eventually becoming the director of operations in Manhattan. So here I was 25 years old, and I was running all the operations other than marketing, programming, and finance of then the largest cable company in the U.S. And but just around 1980, all the big cities began to realize that cable TV was more than just good reception, and everybody wanted cable. But the city of Los Angeles gave out a franchise to a Canadian company out of Toronto that to build the first 61-channel two-way interactive cable system on Earth. And but the caveat in the franchise agreement was that it had to be built underground. They didn't want it to go on telephone poles. And well, so the Canadian company had to find someone who knew how you build underground. And there I was. So, at 30 years old, I got recruited to come out to LA to build Valley Cable, which was the first, 61 channel cable system ever built. And, at that time, there weren't 61 channels in existence. So I would buy character generators, and I would have just text channels, the school lunch channel, the library channel, the city government channel, and, all of that kind of stuff. But we were always looking for like what we could put on that would be more interesting. So, then I met this guy. I was always fascinated that all my neighbors were going to parties and premieres and Hollywood stuff in LA. And I said to the studios, I said, hey, why don't you put me on the list? And they went, you're a utility. You like the phone company or the gas company. No, we're not putting you on the list. And then I met a guy, I think he was from Universal. And I said, I don't understand. The most effective marketing vehicle you have for a movie is a movie trailer. But yet the only time I've ever seen a movie trailer is when I'm already in the movies. I said, wouldn't you want me to see that when I'm at home to make me want to go to the movies? And he said, yeah, but 2 minutes, too expensive to buy TV time. I said, great. I got a lot of channels with not a lot to put on. You give me the movie trailers, I'll put them on TV, but you put me on all those party and premiere lists. And they were more than happy to do that. But when we started doing research, audience research, what's your favorite channel? People go, oh, I love CNN, I love ESPN, I love that trailer channel. And, I just filed that in the back of my head. I said, that's weird. I'm getting the best 2 minutes of then a $50 million movie for free, and people loving it as much as they like ESPN and CNN. So then a few years later, the company I worked for in Toronto sold out. And they were like, okay, Larry, when are you going to come to Toronto? And I go, no. I said, I didn't go from New York to LA to go to Toronto. I said, I'm done with the cold. I'm staying out here. So me and my friend Alan, said, who was also from the East Coast, we said, let's kick around ideas to keep us both out here. And, he going, well, I don't know. He goes, I've been playing around with this idea of, like, I was wondering why nobody's done like MTV of the movies. And I'm like, wait a second. I said, MTV really, when they were doing music, would stand a host in front of a green screen and display, music videos they were getting free from all the recording companies. And I said, so they stand a host in front of a green screen and go, hey, Madonna has a new video. I said, we could stand a host in front of a green screen and go, hey, and Schwarzenegger has a new movie. The same thing, getting this incredibly valuable video assets for free and surrounding them with incredibly low cost production. That time, TV networks, the start of TV network, were somewhere between 60 and $100 million. We just thought we were really smart. But then when we started going out, we were rejected over 100 times. And people going, it's an interesting idea, but people don't start TV networks. Only big media companies do.
Right, because this is around the same time. I remember Fox started coming out as the fourth network. And obviously, you've got Turner and 20th Century and all that funding behind creating a network, which was really, I think, just The Simpsons and football games at first. Did you feel like you were swimming against the tide?
Yeah, I mean, because everybody just said, Larry, it's a good idea, but you're not Rupert Murdoch, go get a job in a supermarket or something. Yeah. And so, yeah, we just got rejected after rejected. I mean, in one meeting with a VC, the guy actually, then you had to print your business plan. It was before word processing. Literally took the business plan and threw it at my head and said, how dare you insult me with such a piece of garbage?
Really?
Yeah, and that was kind of weird. But, here I am, I'm in 30-year-old, 30-something years old. And finally, we met someone who said, I know this guy who just took over investment banking for what was a bond house on Wall Street. And he might like this. Here's his number. Call him, tell him I sent you. And so Alan and I went there, and it was kind of odd because, after 100 rejections, we were kind of really beat up. And we go in this guy's office, and his name Jeff Pollock, and we go through, he's got movie posters on the wall. And we were like, well, this is odd. And he goes, yeah, I used to be the entertainment reporter for my college newspaper. And we were like, okay, yeah. And so he goes, I really like this. I want to do it. I said, great. Could you give us more like the $100 million than the 60? Because, we have big plans for this. And he's like, well, no. He goes, I'm only allowed to sign for 2.5. I go, what am I supposed to do with $2.5 million? I can't even buy the cameras. He goes, well, that's all I'm allowed to sign for. Al and I just looked at each other and said, you know what? After 3.5 years of getting beat up, we said, fine, we'll take the 2.5. So we literally took the $2.5 million. And I had a friend who was teaching radio, television, film at University of Texas in Austin. And I called him up and said, hey, Brian, do you have any kids that need intern jobs for the summer? And he went, yeah, we had a hard time placing folks. He goes, how many you need? I go, well, how many you got? He goes, well, he ended up sending us 31 interns from UT Texas. And what people don't realize, because he has grown into, 142 countries, $7 billion valuation and all that. But he started with 11 employees, 31 interns, and $2.5 million.
I think it's fascinating to look at the parallel. If you remember the way that Facebook got started, I mean, there were early social networks that were trying to be all things to all people, and they didn't have the technology or the funding for that. So they said, we're just going to be a social network for colleges. Yep. And sometimes that constraint, I think, gives you a focus, which really accelerates your rise. How did you know it was working? You're starting something, there's not really a model for it. You've got a bunch of kids and a fraction of the money you thought you needed. What was the first clue you had that e-entertainment was working?
Well, we started just showing movie trailers and, again, following the MTV thing, where they were standing a host in front of a green screen showing music videos. We started a host in front of green screen showing movie trailers. And we kind of sliced and diced it. Tuesday night was the foreign film night. Wednesday night was the independent film night. And Friday was coming this weekend. And so we just maximized the use of it. But we had to be very clever. With $2.5 million, we said, we're not going to dazzle anybody with production value because we couldn't even buy professional broadcast equipment. We bought used equipment that some company was using for sales training tapes. And so didn't even look like professional television. But then we got to the point where we went on the air and people were going, oh, my God, that's what you wanted to do. We would have given you that money 3 years ago. We were like, yeah, okay. But, we quickly grew immediately. In the first year, we grew to 14 different countries, which was unheard of back in the day because nobody was realizing other than us the fact that the world was becoming the world and not just, the US centric models that everybody else was following. But, but to be inventive, we had to come up with low cost programming, and we wanted to do some time anchored stuff. So the first show we came up with, and everybody thought Alan and I were crazy. We said we want to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And they were like, what? They go, you can't do that. But we started this thing called Talk Soup. And, everybody's going, that's crazy. Who's going to give you their clips? Everybody was giving their clips because they found out by us making fun of it, it actually increased their audience. So, and Talk Soup, the crazy idea, ran 26 years.
Yeah, I think that's such a bellwether and it's such an indicator of the influence and the impact that you had. Even think twice about it. Got my cup right here. Coffee really got going in America back in the early days of the revolution because tea was seen as British, unpatriotic. So let's drink something that isn't tea. And that's how coffee became so popular back in the 70s, in the 1770s. And so when I think about so many of the things that we just see that are interwoven in our pop culture, whether it's Jon Stewart and Jimmy Kimmel and red carpet shows and what's going on with the Kardashians, it's all there at the beginning with entertainment. When you look around the world today, and you see your fingerprints on so much of it, what's your take on it?
I still, I'm still like a humble kid from Coney Island. I look at it and I go, Alan and I couldn't have been the only ones that knew that the world loved Hollywood and Hollywood gossip. So I think we executed brilliantly, but, we're going, was it really that hard to figure out that people love Hollywood celebrities and, all the Hollywood stuff? Every once in a while, something will happen that, I go, I can't believe that. I was in China. I started doing business in China, and my partner in Beijing was introducing me to someone in television there, and she was speaking Mandarin to him, and I understand a little bit, but not a heck of a lot. And she's trying to explain he's the guy that started E-Channel, and he's now in 140 countries and stuff like that. And I could just see the puzzled look on the guy's face. Until all of a sudden he turned around and went, talk soup. Just this big smile on his face. And I went, okay, now I get it. We've impacted a lot of people. We were the first influencer of pop culture. But a lot of that coming, one of the things that really turned us around, when in the first year, we applied for credentials for the Oscars. And we got rejected, but we got rejected with a really nasty note. It was like, oh, you're some dumb little cable network. We would never give you, red carpet access to the Oscars. Don't call us again. And me and the crew, we climbed over the fence and we snuck in, and we were on the red carpet, and, we're running around with the camera, and then everything was very stiff. And Alan and I just always had the sensibilities. Hollywood is funny stuff. Don't try and make believe it's rocket science. And so, you had Entertainment Tonight going, so, Mr. Cruz, tell us about your next movie, And, but we're on the red carpet going, wow, Tom, those are amazing shoes. Where'd you get those? And, we just took a whole different attitude. And then when we showed it, people were, sending us messages and, phone calls and stuff going, wow, that was so amazing. We felt like we were fly on the wall watching something we're not supposed to. But it kind of changed everything. It changed the way red carpet was done literally forever.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about entertainment itself becomes entertainment. I didn't know the story about your sneaking onto the red carpet, but that's a fascinating one. Story because you're such a serial founder and entrepreneur. So after E gets going, after you get Talk Soup going with Greg Kinnear, Craig Kilborn, Jon Stewart, all the other things that have happened with it, I would have been content to just cruise on that. But then you took that momentum and you went overseas and you started media ventures in Russia and China. Talk to me about that.
Well, Talk Soup followed by, the next crazy idea was to put cameras in this guy's radio studio, and the guy turned out to be Howard Stern, who did pretty well. But I had always looked at, technology and saying that as technology keeps bringing down the barriers to entry and makes it cheaper and cheaper to make visual entertainment, that Hollywood will stop being the production center of the world. I mean, you used to need big sound stages and expensive cameras, but as it became cheaper, countries are going, hey, we don't need to buy shows from the US. We can make our own and stuff like that. So I really focused on building the international side of it. And, even now, I mean, he is in as many countries as CNN. Even while I was still at E, somebody, a lawyer in town said, hey, I've got these clients that are in merchant banking, but they were doing stuff in Russia, and somebody proposed a media deal. I don't know if it's good or not. Do you think you could go over there and take a look at it and tell me whether you think my client should do this? So I was like fascinated, going, go to Russia? Yeah, I'll do that. Wasn't long before the wall came down and all of that. But I met the mayor of St. Petersburg, and the mayor said to me, he goes, you're the only Hollywood person that we ever seen here. Moscow is collapsing, and children, the funding for the children's hospital and the orphanage is not coming anymore, and these kids are starving. I want to start a music festival to raise money for the charities. And I was like, I don't know anything about music. And he went, well, you got to know more than I do. And I went, yeah, all right, that's probably true. So working with the mayor of St. Petersburg, we started this thing called the White Nights Festival, which goes June 16th to June 21st every year. And we would raise 100% of the budget for the children's hospital and the orphanage. But the vice mayor then, who was the guy I had to work with, on the logistics of getting this festival going, was a guy named Vladimir Putin. So when,
Really?
yeah, so when so Putin and I worked on that, we got along great, because here I am helping the kids in the city that he grew up with. But when he kind of went up and ascended into the Kremlin, he realized that in order to build a consumer economy, you had to have media that would look a little bit familiar to Western marketers. Because people would want to buy the Gucci's and the Pradas and, typically Western luxury goods. They asked, would you work with the Minister of Communications on rewriting regulatory policy for the media business there, which I did, and that went well. And then I started, I fell in love with it. I started doing programming there, and, we did a lot there. We did the Over 35 tennis tour and Disney on Ice, and we did live events. We did movies. We did TV shows. We brought soap operas into the market because we figured they get enough bad news. They don't need any more.
Right.
And, then the Chinese kind of came to that same conclusion that they needed to do media reform. They went to the Russians, and the Russians said, well, this guy in LA that Vladimir knows, helped us. Here's his number. So I got called in by the Chinese government. And so I helped them with that. And then they asked me if I could work with young TV executives, kind of helping them through the transition from Communist Party television to more commercial television. I did that. And then, the guys that we work with there, if you had a profile it, they're 40 to 50. They went to Stanford, Harvard, Yale. And they just, said, why don't you start a media company here so we could learn from you? And I went, you don't let Western media companies in here. And they went, well, we can fix that for you. So they set us up as an experimental company, and, we continue to operate in China, and, we do literally everything there, from music, live events, TV, internet content, branded.
Yep. Hearing all of that, I'm just fascinated. You're obviously well-traveled. Outside of the U.S., what's one of your favorite places to visit?
I was doing a show for China. I was doing a show in Croatia, and using Chinese hosts, and we were going around. And, what is it about Croatia that we thought would interest the Chinese traveler? And I just fell in love with the country. I just love the people were great. The food was great. The history was great. The islands are amazing. You're literally right across the sea from Italy, and So if I had to pick today, it would be Croatia.
Larry, from your vantage point, taking things that are sort of universal truths and then adapting them to local technology and then pushing the technology to go farther and then figuring out, what does this market need? What does that market need? What's the advice that you give when people ask you, what should they be thinking about?
Well, I mean, number one, realize that technology marches on whether you like it or not. Anybody who's not learning AI and how to bring AI into their equation is going to get left behind. So pay attention to technology and stuff, because it transforms the way you do business, and it's an unbelievable creative tool.
Mhm.
Number two, particularly for folks in the U.S., stop thinking of just the U.S. as being the only market. You got to think globally. Now, if you don't think of what the foreign markets are, and you could, two things, you could create things that may resonate for the whole world. But, the advice I always give to entrepreneurs of any sort these days, there's always been the saying, follow your passion. Most people confuse their passion with their hobby. And unless you could look at what it is you're trying to do and figure out how you're going to sustain, most of the time you're better off find something that you're good at, work your butt off until you become great at it, and then that'll become your passion, which will then give you enough of the financial resources to do your hobbies.
My dad used to say, find something that's your passion, and if you get good at it, you will find someone to pay you a living wage. You may not become rich, but you will be happy. And I would mix that with Malcolm Gladwell's research that said, if you spend 10,000 hours doing something,
Well, yeah.
you will more than likely get good at it. How long did it take Tom Brady to become a great quarterback? Well, it's about 10,000 hours worth of practice. And,
Yep.
I do think that tenacity is so essential. The other thing that we were talking about this with one of our clients recently, how do you know when something's not working? What are the signals that you look for when it's time to just move in a different direction?
If I have a skill, that's it. I wake up every day with 10 new ideas. And by the time I go to sleep, it's like I realize most of them were dopey. But what I do is literally every night I self-assess everything I'm doing. We all are on this planet for a relatively limited amount of time. So time is our most valuable asset. So a lot of people start something and then they stick with it because they feel they have to. I look at stuff and go, oops, I didn't look at that the right way. I made a mistake, or technology changed, or the laws changed, or whatever it is. And I could get rid of, my biggest failure in business. Me and a group of friends, we owned this during the internet heyday when domain names were going for crazy numbers. We owned television.com. And, Barry Diller, I think, offered us like $6 or $7 million for it. And, I was like, Barry, look at this face. Does this look like an idiot? If sex.com sells for 10 million, television.com should be 12. And he said, good luck, and, get out of my office. And, so we decided to put it on to launch it as all things television. And, when we started it, CPMs for, people were paying $25 for 1,000 viewers. And then the market crashed, 98, I think it was. But here we are, innovative, doing video in 1998, 6 frames a second, but still video. And we found the more people that watched us, the more money we lost. And so we ended up shutting it down and eventually sold it off for a lot less than we were offered. But yeah,
I think AI is one of those inflection points that's going to shift not just the business world, but the entertainment world. I think about the evolution and revolution of just bandwidth. There was a story in The Onion, the satirical fake news site, about 25 years ago that talked about how Hewlett-Packard had come up with a new $10,000 PC that would let you watch a movie over the internet. And it was such a joke in 1999. And now people sit around and on their phones, on a flight, on Wi-Fi, and they have that capability. I do wonder about the ability of AI to start doing dynamic entertainment filtering and creation. So knowing that I may have personal tastes and preferences when I'm watching a movie, dynamically adjust a movie to being something that I that's tailored to my interests. I don't know where it's going. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
curious about,
Yeah, I
um,
try to tell the guilds and the unions not to do long-term contracts because there's no way of knowing where it's going to be 10 years from now. Anybody who
right,
tells you where it's going to be 2 years from now is probably lying too. When you look at the difference between ChatGPT and GPT-4, 8 months later, it was 800 times more powerful than GPT.
right.
There's no way of predicting where this is going and stuff. I think it's a tool for creative people. But, if you were to ask me you would take a look at writing a business plan for, any kind of TV service or visual, video service. It used to take me 5 days to do the research and create a budget and, do a business plan and a PowerPoint and all that. Now I use Perplexity more than I use any other. It takes me 30 seconds to do it, but then it takes me an hour to edit it and clean it up because it's never 100%. And if you go
Right.
back to the fact that time is our most valuable asset, I go, how could you not love that? I mean, if I can get paid the same for my 1 hour work as I used to get paid for my 5 days of work, why would I not want to do that? I could either do more of it, make more money. I could spend more time with my little grandbaby. I could go to Croatia. I could learn to speak Spanish and, all of that.
I was having a discussion with an AI leader at Microsoft who was asking me my perspective on the proper role of AI in the creative arts. I'd love to get your take on how much is it okay to let AI get into the creative process?
Um, most of what I do, or I do it is, and again, my sensibility is a little bit strange, which I guess is part of my success in it. I use it for the mundane, and then I inject myself or my voice or my sensibility into stuff after. So I don't think it ever replaces, the human emotion and feeling and stuff like that. And yeah, again, I just don't think it ever replaces us. I think everybody's got to learn how to use it. I mean, I one of the practical uses, after 20 years of people bugging me, I finally wrote a book, and I the book 4 days after it came out made the bestseller list, and the publisher, was calling me up. He goes, "Larry, did you buy all the books? How could this be?" And I said, "You know what? I used AI to do the marketing plan. I followed it.
Mhm.
It understood the algorithms way better than I can possibly do it. And, literally in 4 days, this book hit the bestseller list. I mean, I thought that's a great use of AI.
What's the title of your book?
The book is called Off Script Recipes for Success.
Well, we'll definitely have to include that in the show notes. Laurie, I am just struck sometimes when I still sit down and I'm at cable and you go from channel to channel to channel, the sweep of what's going on there. I mentioned in the upfront talking about things like Marshall McLuhan or Bruce Springsteen's song about 57 channels. And wow, we're in a 1,000-channel era, plus all of the creators who are on the internet and all those sorts of ranges of things. And I think the thing that brings it all back home is just the kind of the breadth and the scope of what human creativity can do and how we connect with it. And I just want to compliment you on kind of your role in helping shape and drive that for so many of us. Even if the audience doesn't realize that you've been part of it, you absolutely have.
Yeah. Well, most people don't realize, I mean, and it's funny because I have a publicist who cracks up laughing because I pay her to keep me out of the press.
So one question on Polaris I love to round up with my guests is to look beyond the world of business technology into the world of pop culture, which actually is a world you've been in for most of your career. But I'm just wondering if you could reflect on a program or a movie or a song or a book or something you've been in touch with lately that's had an impact on you that you'd like to share with our audience.
So if I wasn't in this TV stuff, I'd be a chef in a restaurant somewhere. Because my real passion is cooking. So my book is somewhere between a memoir and a cookbook. Because I have recipes of the things that I love to cook in there.
So you mentioned cooking. What's one of your favorite things to cook for yourself?
Well, I go back to my Coney Island days and eating in Italian restaurants and stuff. So baked clams, chicken parmesan, that kind of stuff.
Oh, baked clams is fantastic. We were in New York about 2 weeks ago, and Michelle and I had to find a place where we could go get, spaghetti with white clam sauce, because you can't get it quite the same way on the West Coast as you get it in the Northeast.
No. Old school Italian is my favorite.
So, Larry, what's next for you, and how can our audience stay in touch?
Mm-hmm. I kind of call this my Kardashians Repentance Tour. But I've jumped into we're developing shows for Netflix, all the streamers, but we've kind of jumped into the podcast world. I've got a big podcast coming up next month called the Immigrant Podcast. That'll be on YouTube and Spotify and everything. And it's really about celebrating the immigrant experience in the United States. Because I think somehow as a country, we've lost sight of the fact that we were built on waves of immigrants, and that, there's a confusion between immigration and illegal immigration. And I have another one called Stall Talk, which is a women's empowerment thing. We've got series at Amazon and Netflix, and plan on continuing that. It's a lot of fun.
I will have to check out as many of those as I can. So, ladies and gentlemen, Larry Namer created E-Entertainment Television and shaped so much of the media and culture that we experience every day. Thank you for joining us on Polaris.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Up next on Polaris, events. 2025 is drawing to a close, but 2026 is shaping up to be a very busy year. Here's what we're watching. Strategy, now with AI. Kicking off the new year, Synozur will be hosting a special webinar to help you get the best results in 2026. We'll show you how AI transforms our management framework, the company OS, and share a sneak preview of our new online platform, Vega, designed to help you manage leadership and strategy across your organization. That'll be on January 6th, and you can register online. M365 Community Days DC. This is January 29th at the Microsoft Innovation Hub in Arlington, Virginia, joined by our very own Shari Oswald. Partner Vibe, January 28th to 30th at the Marriott Courtyard in South Padre Island, Texas. This is a special event where we'll be speaking about how Microsoft partners can align themselves for everything coming up in 2026. The M365 Community Conference, April 21st to 23rd at the Lowe's Sapphire Falls in Orlando, Florida. Jeff Teeper will be keynoting, I'll be presenting, and of course, we'll be joined by thousands of customers, partners, friends, and the community at large. The AI IM Summit, April 28th to 30th at the Hyatt Regency Inner Harbor in Baltimore, Maryland. You can learn more at Synozur.com/events, and we'll add more events throughout the year. And if you have an upcoming event you'd like us to promote on Polaris, please get in touch and we'd be happy to include it. I recently had a birthday weekend at the Edgewater Hotel in Seattle. I've been a huge Beatles fan for years, so it was a great thrill to stay in the same suite that they used in 1964 on their first U.S. tour, famously fishing out the windows of the Edgewater in Elliott Bay. I'll add the photo of the Beatles to the show notes, and of course, thanks to Michelle and to my family for making that dream happen. So I was thinking about the Beatles while I was finishing this episode. Beatles' White Album was a magnificently sprawling stylistic kaleidoscope, a bold departure from the tightly curated psychedelic opuses of Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That eclectic sprawl, jumping from acoustic ballads to avant-garde experiments, mirrors the explosion of choice in today's media landscape. Bruce Springsteen once lamented having 57 channels and nothing on. But now we live in an era of thousands upon thousands of video options across streaming platforms, social media, and user-generated content. Just as the White Album challenged listeners to navigate a vast sonic landscape, modern audiences face a similar paradox of abundance. Infinite variety, but the same search for meaning and connection. Next time on Polaris, our year-end wrap-up with the Synozur team. It's become an annual tradition for our special holiday episode. We'll recap the year in technology, at Synozur, and in pop culture, while we look forward to our predictions for 2026. After that, I'll have a special episode of Polaris to highlight our annual report on artificial intelligence. We'll share our research from over 100 companies, our 5-year market forecast, and our predictions for what to expect in 2026. Stay tuned and don't miss it. Well, that's a wrap for another episode. I'd like to thank our guest, Larry Namer, for joining us and sharing his thoughts on technology and business innovation. We encourage you to check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. Visit us at polaris.synozur.com. Send us your questions and feedback for the Synozur team. You can reach us via email at polaris@synozur.com. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. And follow us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Polaris is produced with help from Riverside FM. Our theme song, Alternative Dream, is provided courtesy of Adobe. Additional music and sound provided by Indie Guy Records. Graphic design by Josh Brantley. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris McNulty, and this has been Polaris, a show that charts the course for business and technology transformation from Synozur. Learn more at synozur.com. See you next time. Keep following your North Star.